to all of you who have been sending emails and chats and messages on Facebook and so forth of encouragement and notes about the programs. We read all of them. We read everything you send in, and it really does mean a lot. So thank you. This program has certainly grown, and we love spending time with you. We love talking about these comedians, these great comedic legends, and there's nothing we'd rather be doing right now. So this is fantastic. Oh, I was about to say, it looks like we're ready to begin, but we still have people pouring in. All right. I'm sure you can hear the little ding-dong doorbell every time somebody's popping on. But you know what? It's 10:02. We can't wait for all these people. So let's get started. Good morning, everybody. My name is Darren St. George. And this morning we are doing a chit-chat with Sal St. George about Lucille Ball without Desi. We are very excited, as always. Please make sure to have your microphones muted and your cameras off. This way we can better hear and listen to Sal's lecture. If you have any questions during the program, please send a chat. Say good morning. Introduce yourself. Let us know where you're calling in from. We want to hear from all of you. So send a chat. Don't be shy. Also, we are going to be having polls as we go through the program as usual. So if you have any comments, make sure to click into that poll and let us know what you think. Without further ado, let's get to the man of the hour. Sal, hop on board. Here we go.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Good to see everybody. A lot of familiar names up there. I can't believe that people keep coming back, and we certainly appreciate seeing all of you every single Monday morning. It's become a ritual. We're never going to stop this. As long as you keep coming back, we'll be here waiting for you. As a matter of fact, Darren is going to give a survey in a little while, and we'll find out how far we want this to go in the future. Just a couple of little notes for you. I'm in conversation with several different celebrity museums in different parts of the country, and it looks like we're going to be getting another virtual road trip. I don't want to confirm anything yet because of Father's Day and all. I wasn't able to put a date on one on one of them, but I know it's coming through, so I'm real excited about that one, and I think you will be too once I announce where we're going. I think, I can give you a clue. We're going to Iowa. Now, just try to figure out what famous celebrity came from Iowa, and you may be pretty close to where we're going.
You can send in the chat whatever your guesses are.
Yeah.
But also, you mentioned briefly, we are one day belated, but happy Father's Day to all the great fathers out there.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Happy Father's Day. And happy Father's Day to you too, Pop.
Yeah, and thank you. So, and hey, wait a minute. He talks, but in, I think 5 weeks, he's going to have baby number 2 on board.
That's true. Yep.
Yeah.
Number 2.
Yeah. Yep. So, yeah. So we have another. Hey, we'll be here in 5 weeks with you. Yeah. And we'll make the announcement. You can't go anywhere. Don't deliver on a Monday. That's all.
Yeah.
You have to talk to Cassandra about that. Okay, let's get to the lady of the hour, who we're here for. This really all came about because I've been doing a I Love Lucy lecture for a good many years, and I always realized I'm only telling part of the I Love Lucy story, of the Lucille Ball story. There's a lot more to her than I Love Lucy. So I wanted to cover and bookend her life. What was going on before, what was going on afterwards. And can we go to the next slide, Darren? And boy, was she beautiful, when you look at those pictures. So we're going to go and take a tour of her life before and after I Love Lucy to give you an idea of what her life was like. By the way, well, let's go to the next slide, because she was born in Jamestown, New York. And as many of you know, her home is there. They also have a museum, a Lucy Desi museum, but they also created what they call the National Comedy Center. And they have salutes to all the great comedians of all time in this giant center. And this weekend, they had salutes for Father's Day, and they had Lucy Arnaz on talking about her dad, which was just heartwarming. It was a beautiful, and I feel bad we're not talking about Desi today, because she gave such beautiful stories about her father. But here's Lucy. You're looking at her at different stages early in her life. The one where she's sitting with the white cap on, and all, she's 17 years old. 17. She decides, because of the encouragement of her grandfather and all, that she wants to go into show business. Boy, was she Lucy Ricardo before she ever got on the show. And she always felt she couldn't sing, she couldn't dance. She felt she didn't have any real talent, no real attributes. The only thing she said, I could walk, I think I'll be a model. Can we go to the next one? So she becomes a model here in New York City, and she gets noticed by Sam Goldwyn, who was creating the Goldwyn Girls. That was his version of the Follies, the Ziegfeld Follies. You can see on the bottom left, he had about 30 of these basically models. They did not dance. That's Lucy, believe it or not, in the middle, with the white wig, with the wig on and all. That's her. This was pre-code Hollywood, meaning nudity was acceptable in those days. And these were, not that she was, it was more or less playing peekaboo with the audience. On the upper right, you're seeing a very young Lucy with, you might recognize Eddie Cantor. Eddie Cantor made tons of movies for Goldwyn. And if you remember from our conversation with about Danny Kaye, when Eddie got a little long in the tooth, Goldwyn wanted somebody new, and that's how Danny Kaye ended up working with Goldwyn. So anyway, let's go to the next slide. Once she got into doing the Goldwyn Girls, something strange happened. Whenever they needed somebody to do a gag of some kind, they would go to these girls, these models, and see who would do something. Now, let's go back to that line right before one more, the slide before, one more time, Darren. If you look at the line on the bottom left and you see all the Goldwyn Girls, picture this. They're all lined up because Eddie wants to pick one of them to be in a comedy bit. All the models are lined up, and he, one by one, like a drill sergeant, he's interviewing each one of them to see who he's going to put into the comedy bit. Lucy is on the far end, and she sees Eddie coming up the line, talking to each one of the dancers, the girls, and she's nervous. She doesn't believe she can sing. She doesn't believe she can dance. She doesn't think she can act. And she reaches into her pocket, and she pulls out an old Kleenex. And she takes the Kleenex and she tears off a little piece of it, licks it, and plants it right on her head. Takes another piece, rolls it up, boom, another one, like spitballs. And she's just putting them all over her face. Now, she's got her back to Eddie as he's coming down, and she's just putting all these spitballs all over her face. When he gets in front of her, she turns around. He sees all the spitballs on her face. She goes, "You're the one." And that's how she ends up getting into doing comedy bits. Now we can go to the next slide. Once she got into doing movies, look at some of the people she worked with. Those are the Three Stooges that she worked with. Edgar Bergen, Charlie McCarthy. These were the formative years of Lucy learning how to be an actress in front of a camera. And she made tons of movies, and I think we can go to the next one also. She became the queen of the B movies. She was pumping out movies one after another, and she worked with a lot of great actors, as you can see. Jackie Gleason always said Jack Oakey was his inspiration as an actor. He always looked at Jack Oakey for his ideas. Now, as she's going through this, she gets bigger and bigger parts, and there's I don't want to say out of work. There is an actor who was very famous in the 20s that was part of the MGM lot. And what he would do is he would look for talent, and then he would teach them how to be comedians. His name was Buster Keaton, and we'll go to the next slide. And Buster really saw potential in young Lucy. As a matter of fact, he took her under his wing, and he also took Red Skelton under his wing. He was teaching them comedy all the time. Now, these were the three rules that he taught them about doing comedy. Observe the situation, consider the situation, and react to the situation. It was a three-step process. What does that mean? How does that work? By the way, she stayed friends with Buster through the rest of his life. We'll go to the next slide, and I'm going to explain observe, consider, and react. And this is one of the best examples of it. Here's Lucy in the great grape stomping scene. Number one, observe the situation. She's sitting there and the Italian woman throws grapes in her face. Look at the reaction. What happened there? I got hit. Look at number two. She's considering, how do I deal with this? Look at the look on her face. How am I going to deal with it? And then number three, she reacts to it. These are all deliberate steps. It's not done very quickly. She takes her time. She realized she got hit. Number two, what am I going to do with this woman? And number three, she just stomps over to her and just boom, plops it into her face. Those were the three rules of thumb that he taught Lucy. And I'll be honest with you, she utilizes this in a lot of the I Love Lucy episodes and the Here's Lucy and the Lucy Show. Watch her style. It is all predicated on these three steps. Very interesting. Let's go to the next slide. Oh, by the way, that woman that was doing the grape stomping, I know I talk about this in my other lectures. She did not understand English at all. When they actually got to the part where they were fighting with each other, she took it serious. And Lucy, in latter life, when they were interviewing her, she said she thought she was going to die in that vat. She said, I thought she was going to drown me. I was underneath. When I came out, I had grapes in my nose and my ears and my mouth. But the woman took it very serious. And it's still funny to watch. By the way, if you look on my clips, the Lucy clips, you'll see a lot. I put a lot of great content in there. You'll spend an hour at least going through all those clips. Lucy was a natural dancer. She loved to dance. And once they realized she could dance, they started incorporating her into movies that had dance elements in it. For example, we'll go to the next slide. She made a great movie called Dance Girl Dance with Maureen O'Hara. There she is in the middle, top middle. That's Lucy with the blonde hair. She still has either brunette hair or blonde hair in these movies. But when you see her, that's Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers. She made 3 movies with Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers. No, she didn't dance with Fred, but she was in these movies. A turning point was Stage Door, where she worked opposite her buddy Ginger Rogers. They were great friends. And Katharine Hepburn. She's working with the great Katharine Hepburn. Terrific movie, Stage Door. Check it out. On the right, I can't say enough about the Marx Brothers. She made the film Room Service with them. And that was, again, she's learning, just as she did with Buster. She learned from the Three Stooges. And here she was learning from Harpo and Groucho and Chico comedy techniques. All those pieces came together, and her star kept rising. She got better and better at what she was doing. The roles got bigger and bigger, and which led to this next movie that I think you'll remember. It was called Dewberry Was a Lady. Is she gorgeous? I mean, this was the first movie where she actually had the red hair. She loved it so much, she kept it the rest of her life. But she was stunning. And look who she's starring with. She's opposite Red Skelton and Gene Kelly. The 3 of them were on the cusp of stardom that they never really knew was coming for them. All 3 of them just skyrocketed from here, and we know what their careers were like. But here, we can go to the next slide. They had no idea what they were about to embark on. By the way, on the lower right-hand corner in that movie, in a very small part, I don't know if anybody can recognize him, that's a very young Zero Mostel. And he was in the movie also. Tommy Dorsey's there and Virginia O'Brien. But look at they look like they were having a ball making this movie. They look like they were having so much fun. It was based on a Cole Porter play. And the Cole Porter play, they pretty much took out all the All the songs, they put a few of them in, created some new ones. It didn't really bear much of a resemblance to the original Cole Porter play, but it was a huge success anyway. Now, she's moving up the ladder. She's making more and more movies. She's the leading lady in the movies, and she gets cast in a movie, and that's the next slide, called Too Many Girls. Now, Too Many Girls was a Broadway show that was coming to Hollywood, and in the cast was a very young Desi Arnaz. By the way, Desi was 23 years old and Lucy was 28 years old. This is where they met. The first time you saw her, she was making that movie we previously mentioned called Dance Girl Dance, and there was a part in there where she had to have a rough and tumble battle with Maureen O'Hara, and Desi was sitting in the commissary, and she came by, and she was covered in mud, and her hair was all in disarray, and she looked terrible. And it was all part of the part, you know, it was all part of the role she was playing. And he mentioned to the guy he was sitting with, he said, "Who's that?" And he said, "You don't know? That's Lucille Ball. She's a big star. She's a star of the movie you're going to make, Too Many Girls." And he says, "I was on Broadway, and our leading lady looked nothing like that. I don't see how she can do it." Come a couple of hours later, he's on the set. We can go to the next slide, and in comes Lucy, and now she's ready for the role, and she looks stunning. And the first thing he says to his friend is, how does he say it? Well, the best way to describe it, he walks up to Lucy, and his opening line is something every guy in the audience, you got to remember this one next time you meet somebody you want to impress. He walked up to her and he said, "Would you like to learn how to rumba?" Yeah. They hit it, whatever it was, whether it was her red hair, whether it was his Latin charm. He was young, he was enthusiastic. Nobody had ever seen anything like a Desi Arnaz before in that form. Yeah, we had the Cesar Romeros and Fernando Lamas, but we never had anybody like a Desi Arnaz, who was he was like a firecracker. 6 months after they made this movie, they eloped. That's them on their wedding day. They eloped to Connecticut. They went right around the corner from us, and they got married. That's when things got a little difficult for Lucy and Desi, simply because he had his own orchestra that was touring all over the country. She was under contract, and she was pumping out movies one after another, and they were apart a good deal of the time. Naturally, they start wondering, you know, is she fooling around? Is he fooling around? They're accusing each other of all kinds of things. And Lucy ends up not only doing great in movies, but she gets tapped to do her own radio show. She's doing her own radio show. And if we can go to the next slide, it was called My Favorite Husband. That's Richard Denning, who played her husband on the TV show. There's Lucy at the microphone. It was a very popular show at the time. Now, they're doing the radio show, and there's this new thing coming up on the horizon called television. And everybody was taking their radio shows and moving them into TV. So Jack Benny was coming to TV, and I don't even have to name them all. Jack Benny and Dragnet, The Lone Ranger, they were all coming. Candid Camera. There were so many shows. Yeah, Candid Camera started out as a radio show. It was called Candid Microphone, and Alan Funt was recording people and getting their reactions to unusual circumstances. He was probably the very first reality star on television, making a reality TV show, because TV was the perfect medium for him to pull his pranks, and he went on for decades doing Candid Camera. So they want to bring My Favorite Husband to television, and they mention it to Lucy, and she says, "I'll do it." And I really like Richard. He and I get along wonderfully, but if we're going to do a TV show, I really want my husband, Desi, to play my husband on TV. And they said, "Are you kidding?" They said, who's going to believe that you're married to a Cuban? And she says, I am married to a Cuban. If you watch my other lecture, it turned into a huge situation where Desi came up with all the ideas that moved my favorite husband into the next slide, which happened to just be I Love Lucy. Somehow he had the business sense, the common sense to create this iconic TV show that has never left the air since it aired back in the 50s. It never, somewhere in the world right now, people are watching I Love Lucy. Never lost it. By the way, we're going to, well, you know what? Yeah, hold on one second. I just want to just mention something. When they put this together, they had some of their best friends come on the show to be as a part of it. And one of the things that was interesting is everybody talks about Vita Vita Vegemin. Everybody talks about it. They love that routine. As a matter of fact, Darren, if you want to do that first survey, this would be a good time. That routine was basically an offshoot of a routine that Red Skelton was doing for many years called Guzzler's Gin, where he was selling Guzzler's Gin, and as he's doing the commercial, slowly but surely, he's getting intoxicated by taking a swig of it. I always talk about people saying, oh, they stole my routine. Red never felt that way with Lucy. He loved her. They were good friends. They stayed friends for the rest of their lives. But when you take a routine like Guzzler's Gin and you enhance it and you change it around and you turn it into what they did with Vita Vita Vegemin, you can't compare the two. You can watch them side by side, but they're two different routines altogether. If you go onto the Red Skelton playlist, you'll see Guzzler's Gin in there and you can take a peek at that. Okay, Darren is taking a survey. Yeah. Which of the routines did you find to be your favorite? Was it the Chocolate Factory? Was it the Grape Stomping or Vita Vita Vegemin?
So I'm going to actually ask you, because you can't see the results, but there's a decisive winner. What would you think the vote is? Chocolate Factory, Grape Stomping, or Vita Vita Vegemin?
I got a feeling the Chocolate Factory is pretty popular.
You know the audience. Chocolate Factory walks away with 59% of the votes.
Wow.
Yep. Second place goes to Vita Vita Vegemin with 26%. And Grape Stomping still has it has 16% of the vote. But this really is definitive. Chocolate Factory. And
well, whenever I do my Lucy lecture, that's probably the first routine that they ask me to talk about. And I don't want to get into that whole other lecture, but there's one thing I want you to do. Watch the routine. At one point, the forelady is coming in and they're taking all the chocolates and they're shoving them in their mouth. She's shoving it down her shirt. Watch Lucy, because at one point she takes off her hat as if she's going to scoop everything into it. She's actually spitting all the chocolates that she has in her mouth into her hat. If you don't see it, it's going by so fast you don't notice it. But watch it again and you'll see her. She got a mouthful of chocolate and she just dumps it all in her hat and puts it back on her head. Chewed up chocolate on her head. Okay, I'm just getting excited here talking about this stuff.
Anything for comedy.
Anyway, we'll do Lucy another time, but there's no question about it. The show was instrumental in changing the face of television, and we don't have to go into that, but I do want to show the next slide because, as I said, she invited many of her friends on. You saw a movie that she made with the Marx Brothers back in the early, the late 30s. Here she is. She had Harpo on her show doing a routine that the Marx Brothers had created. Terrific. And then the next slide is, again, Lucy and Red, and they're doing a routine that was created specifically for the Lucy Desi Comedy Hour. But what's interesting about it, Lucy always said that she wasn't funny. that she was not a funny person. She was brave, meaning she would try anything to get the laugh. And we've seen that through all the years of her programming. She would do just about anything to make sure she got a laugh. When she was working with Red and she had to do the female equivalent of Freddie the Freeloader, she went to Red and said, Red, I want you to teach me everything you know about Freddie the Freeloader, how to walk, how to talk, how to, all the gestures. And he looked at her and he said, Lucy, I don't know what I'm doing. He said, it just comes natural to me. I just do it and it just happens. He didn't have, it was instinctive. That's the best way to describe it. Red felt it was all very instinctive how he created that character. She watched him do the routine dozens of times. Watch this clip when you have time, and you'll see how she mimics him right down to the last, and then the same way she did with Harpo in the previous scene. She was a great mimic, and she learned what was funny. Okay, hold on one second here. I just want to, okay. Now, I want to go to the next slide. These are happy days for Lucy and Desi. First of all, they always said that when they were putting the program together, all they wanted to do was work together, have a few kids, and have a life. That was it. They weren't looking for anything grand. They weren't looking for something bigger than that. And these are great shots of them just at home relaxing. Now, what happened was when Lucy and Desi had this TV show that became such a success, they made so much money that they were able to buy RKO Studios, and that evolved into Desilu Studios. Once they got Desilu Studios, Lucy had been in the business for so many years, all her friends started calling her up. Can I film my show at your place? Can I film my show at your place? And they were, everybody from the Dick Van Dyke Show and the Danny Thomas Show, and you can watch all the old shows from the 60s, 50s, 60s, and you'll see Desilu at the end of it. They exploded. They got so big that Desi's part in the show had to be reduced because he was spending so much time running the studio. The thing of it was, though, when he did come in, if he was going to be in the episode, and he had to be in the episode, they started giving most of the big bits to Vivian Vance. So that's when all of the great routines between Vivian Vance and Lucy transpired. But whenever Desi was there, they made sure they created a scene for him that was equally as funny, if not bigger. He always had to have something big when he got there. Next slide, because as they grew and they got bigger and bigger, their relationship was hurt by the business. You know, there's all kinds of stories. There's all kinds of rumors about his infidelities, about the drinking. They both drank. They had difficulties. There's no question about it. But one thing you got to walk away from when you see this, they never stopped loving each other. They never did. Right to the day he passed away, they never stopped loving each other. And we'll go to the next slide. After they broke up, after they got their divorce, which was in 1960, Lucy married, she said, I traded a Cuban for a Reuben. He was a Borscht Belt comic. He was, he claimed that he had never seen an episode of I Love Lucy simply because he was a comic and he was always on stage at night. So he never saw any of her shows. I don't know if that's true or not. That's the story that he gave everybody. But that was, they got married. It was a March 4th, 1960. It was right after the divorce, about a year later. And we'll go to the next slide. And Desi also got married. There he is on the bottom right with Jimmy Durante. And he married, hold on one second, Edith Hirsch was her name. Some people said he married her because she had red hair also, and she had a good sense of humor. Both Lucy and Desi stayed with their second marriages until they passed away. They never divorced again. They interestingly, Lucy and Desi became closer once they divorced, and they had a great family life. They had grandchildren that they both adored, and they just stayed together that way. They were better friends being divorced than they were working together. Let's face it, that show took a toll on both of them. Can we go to the next slide, please? Oh, by the way, every year on her anniversary, on um, on their wedding anniversary, on Lucy and Desi's wedding anniversary, he still sent her flowers every year for the rest of his life. He always sent her flowers. Okay, so what happens next? We have the Lucy show, and we have Here's Lucy. The Lucy show was pushed by Desi. He knew that Lucy had to be in front of an audience. People don't talk about this, but Desi was involved with everything that Lucy did, even after their divorce. He stayed with her and he continually gave her ideas. When she had Lucy's second husband, that was Gary Morton. Didn't I say that? Yeah. Um, when um, when they were putting the Lucy show together, Vivian Vance hopped on board, and they formulated they did a great routine in that show that I have in the clips, where they get stuck in a shower stall and the water can't be turned off, and the water level keeps rising and rising in the shower stall. You know, it's funny because Lucy and Vivian were not the best of friends in the beginning. It was something that evolved during the years, especially in the beginning when the I Love Lucy went on the air. Vivian Vance and William Frawley weren't even recognized when they were doing press junkets to advertise the new show, because Lucy was the star of the show. Everybody said, "Oh, Lucy's coming to TV." She was the big star. Vivian Vance and William Frawley were not considered as important. But as the years went on, especially when Lucy and Desi divorced, at the same time Vivian was getting a divorce, that's what bonded them together, and they started working together. After doing the Lucy show, she went into Here's Lucy, and Here's Lucy was her way of working with her kids. She wanted to make sure that Lucy and Desi Jr. were part of her program, and they started working together in those two shows. Um, Neither one of these shows, they were both always popular. They were always um, getting great ratings, but neither one of these was the creative equivalent to I Love Lucy. Very different, very, very different. They were good. I'll be honest with you, I find some of these harder to watch today than I Love Lucy. I can watch I Love Lucy anytime. These shows, she had a unique way of performing, and it was almost like everybody was yelling their lines to each other. Everything was loud. It was very different. And she had this policy. She hated the program All in the Family, because there were many instances where Edith would be running in the room, "Oh, Archie," and she would have a line for him. And Lucy felt, when you're delivering a line, you stand still, and everybody else, you better stand still too. Nobody move when you're delivering a punchline. And these were the rules that she grew up with I Love Lucy. She didn't realize the world was changing, and comedy, yes, was changing.
Yeah.
Okay.
You also see those rules taking place in The Honeymooners.
Yeah, yeah. By the way, William Frawley did make a brief appearance on the Lucy show. What year? Let me see. That was March 3rd, 1966. It was 5 days after his 79th birthday. He does a walk-on. They ask him for directions. He says, "Just go this way," whatever. It's just a brief thing. And as he exits, Lucy says, "Gee, he reminds me of somebody I used to know." And that was it. It was just a quick walk-on that he did. He was too ill to go on. As we remember, William Frawley from Lucy went on My Three Sons. He got too sick to continue that role, and it was recreated by William Demarest. He took over for William Frawley. Okay, next slide. So here's Lucy, and she hits Broadway. Now, the idea of her going on Broadway was something, this reminds me so much of when we did the Danny Kaye story. Because when people came to see Danny Kaye in two by Two, they expected to see Danny Kaye being Danny Kaye. And when the people came to see Wildcat, they expected Lucy to be Lucy. And it really took a toll on her. It was 1960. She was 49 years old. She was doing 8 shows a week. It knocked the heck out of her, and she ended up collapsing. She had to recuperate. They didn't even think of getting somebody else in there because people were canceling their tickets. They just wanted to see Lucy. She tried coming back again. She was only there a brief time, collapsed again, and then they realized they had to cancel the show. By the way, in this cast, if you go to the next slide, a very, very young Valerie Harper was a dancer in the show. And everybody look at the dancer on the extreme right in the color picture. Doesn't that look like a young Valerie Harper? There's no credits on this photograph, but that looks like a very young Valerie Harper to me. That's Lucy's kids. They came backstage to see her, and there's her buddy Vivian Vance on backstage greeting her. They did the show, and it folded after 171 performances. They couldn't find a replacement that would take her place. They just wanted to see Lucy.
We still couldn't.
Yeah, that's true. Lucy continued making movies, and one of her favorite men in the world is in the next slide, and it was Bob Hope. And they continued making movies after another. Southall Jones, Fancy Pants. Those are 2 of the better movies. We'll go to the next slide. And then Facts of Life and Critics' Choice were 2 of their worst movies. Okay, for some reason, and I hate blaming it on Bob, but after a while he became so robotic in his delivery that I didn't feel like he was invested in the movies the way he was when he did Sorrowful Jones and the other before that. Anyway. But she continued in staying in front of the public. She still made movies, still made guest appearances on TV. I've seen her on Password. I've seen her on game shows. I've seen her doing the Dean Martin roast. She was always out there, still performing. Can we go to the next one, please?
I know somebody also mentioned that she was seen on, she does a cameo with Abbott and Costello in Hollywood.
Oh, yes, in the movie, yes. Now, here's an interesting thing. Holy cow, does she look great? This is 1974. They decided to do the movie version of Mame, and they pulled out all the stops. I mean, look at the costumes, look at her makeup. It was just a stunning recreation of the Broadway show. Can we go to the next slide? And they didn't shortchange it. I mean, look at some of these costumes. Look at all the cast, the chorus that she has, the ensemble in the upper right-hand corner. Harold Hill, Robert Preston was her leading man. Couldn't get better. On the bottom left, that's Maude B. Arthur, who is recreating the role that she created on Broadway doing Mame. Problem was, these movies were falling out of favor at this point. Big budget musicals were not popular the way they had been. Lucy was extremely proud of it. In many interviews that I saw at that time period, she was boasting how she's finally made a real family movie. You could bring the children to it. It doesn't, she was, I don't want to say prudish. She did not like the new style of comedy that was coming out. She thought it was offensive. She thought it was crude, rude. This was her answer to all of that. Unfortunately, as they say, the parade went by. The world was changing. 1974, you had All in the Family, Maude, and you had all these great shows on Sanford and Son. And what Lucy was doing was a little bit archaic at this point. We can go to the next slide, because in August 17, 1979, Lucy lost one of her best friends, and it took her a while, and I'm talking about Lucy herself, to realize how much Vivian was augmenting her own performance. And there was an interview with her, and she said that at one point in her life, and she was older at this point, she sat down and started watching some of the, not only the I Love Lucy's, but when she was on the other show together with her, but more in particular, she was talking about I Love Lucy. She said, I didn't realize how good Vivian was. I didn't realize what she was bringing to each one of these performances. She said, I wish I had told her then what I know now and how good she really was. She made me look even better. That's what a good straight man was, and that's what Vivian was doing. She was a straight man for Lucy. The same thing with Desi. Desi was a straight man for Lucy, and again, Vivian did not have a background in comedy. She was she believe it or not, if you saw some of the early pictures of her, she always played the sultry vixen, the one that was the man chaser, the one that always stole the husband away from the wife. She was very voluptuous and beautiful. When she got onto I Love Lucy, they gave her more frumpy type of clothing. They just wanted to have a contrast between her and Lucy. It was something that she always regretted. And when they did Here's Lucy, the Lucy show, she put it in her contract that she wanted nicer clothing so that she didn't look frumpy all the time. But losing William Frawley, losing Vivian Vance really took a toll on Lucy. Can we go to the next slide, please? So here we are in 1985. Yeah, that's our Lucy. She made a movie called Stone Pillow, and we talk all the time about how comedians are capable of doing drama, whereas it's harder to get a dramatic actor to do comedy. She played a bag lady in New York City. It got great reviews, great ratings, but poor reviews. People just, the critics just did not buy into it. Maybe after 25 years on TV, they all had a certain image of Lucy, and this was a stark change for her. It was really something that I give her credit for getting in front of the camera like this and playing this role. You can see it on YouTube, Stone Pillow. Take a peek at it, and you'll see a very, very unique performance by Lucille Ball. Terrific, terrific. I give her credit for doing it. I really do. Can we go to the next slide? Now, what happened was Lucy and Desi, as I said, stayed friends the rest of their lives. In 1986, they were preparing a brand new show for Lucy. It was called Life with Lucy. Desi was a little too ill to be involved with it at this point, but you can see they still had an affection for one another. They still cared about each other. And if we can go to the next slide, please. When he passed away, he was only 69 years old, lung cancer. As all of us know, the two of them smoked an awful lot. I love that shot I have of the two of them on top there in their younger years and then below in their latter years. His last words to her are on the screen below. I love you too, honey. Good luck with your new show. And he was talking about the new program that she was putting together. She didn't really have, well, before I get into that, her feelings for Desi, I cannot say it enough. She felt like part of her died when he passed away also. She lost Fred and Ethel and Desi, and the whole team that she was with were all gone now. Now we can go to the next slide, because they put together this show, and this really was the work of her husband, Gary. He thought, let's get her back on the screen, give her something to do. And they put together this show. It was on ABC, and it aired from September 20th to November 15th. That's it. It was Gary's idea. He got the original writers. He got the cinematographer from the I Love Lucy series. That's Gail Gordon, who he coaxed out of retirement. Gail, at this point, was 80 years old. He really didn't want to work again. He put it in his contract that no matter what happened with the show, he would be paid in full. And he was smart to do that. The show, they filmed 14 episodes. 13 were filmed. Only 8 were aired. 8 out of the 13 were aired. It opened up with great ratings, but week after week after week, the ratings kept slumping and going further and further down. Why did it not work? And it's to her legacy that people had this vision of Lucy so embedded in their mind that they never thought she would ever get old. They always saw Lucy as Lucy Ricardo. And when she came on this show, she was 75, I believe. And they were putting her into stunt gags that she was doing when she was in her 40s. There was one where she had to get on top of a ladder to get things off a shelf, and the ladder starts sliding. And I remember, you got to read this book here. Hold on a second. This book here, I Love Lucy. This is the book. Check it out. Darren will have it for you, that you can pick it up. Definitely read it. Lee Tannen befriended Lucy for the last 20 years of her life. He was there. He saw all these things going on. He describes it in detail, what was going on with life with Lucy. And he mentions in there that when she did one of those stunts, the audience didn't laugh, they gasped. They got worried for Lucy. And from that point on, that's when the shows started sliding. Very sad. The really bad part about it, was that was the first time Lucy experienced failure in her life. You got to remember, she was the queen of television for over 25 years. Anything she did was magic. If she did a TV special, if she did guest spots, people loved Lucy, and they kept to, you're here today because you love Lucy. You have those memories of Lucy. So and I would love to know how many people even saw this show when it went on the air. I would just text it in to Darren, because if the show went on and off so quickly, people didn't even realize it. ABC bought the show without a script, without the cast, all they had was Lucy. And at this point in time, other shows were utilizing older performers in new formats, and the Cosby Show was really big. Golden Girls were really big. Now, if Lucy was in the Golden Girls, that would have been unique. That would have been playing to her age, giving her funny gags. But here she is doing Life with Lucy the way she did I Love Lucy 50 years earlier. Just did not work. It didn't work. And sadly, she just never accepted that she felt America stopped loving her. And for the next few years, that's how she felt, that the American people didn't want to see her. They didn't want to be part of her world anymore. Even when she was doing Life with Lucy, the comedy style was the same style she was using for Here's Lucy, where they yell out their lines to one another. It was really sad. And they had the same writers from I Love Lucy, the same writing team, Bob Carroll and Madeline Pugh. They came back to write for her, but they were writing for a different Lucy. Very sad. I think if she was on Golden Girls, wow, She would have been terrific on that show. She could have done the Maud part. I mean, yeah.
The
Who,
Arthur?
who am I thinking of? Yeah. But anyway, they could have had her doing the B. Arthur part. She would have been terrific in that.
Here
All
we
right, next
have some
slide.
results from people who've seen it, and I really give our audiences, everybody who's tuning in, they know their stuff. They know this history. They are very familiar with all the people we're talking about. However, this show is not very popular. Vast majority of our viewers today have never heard of it or seen it. There are a few members who have. A couple of people wrote in saying that they are familiar with the show. One person does remember a roller skating sketch, which
Very sad.
yeah,
They were really trying to do what they did with her in older episodes. Very sad, very sad. So the next few years, she was in almost like a recluse. And we can go to the next slide, Darren. And Bob called her up. He wanted her to come out of the house. Come on, let's go. I'm doing the Academy Awards. Why don't the two of us give out the award together? And she finally acquiesced, and she went there. You can see on the right, her with Bob, that she was having a good time with it. It was her last public appearance. A month later, Lucy was gone. Very sad. But at least when she came out, the audience gave them an ovation, a standing ovation that lasted several minutes. It was a wonderful reception for her. She knew they still loved her. Last slide.
How old was she when she passed?
What was that?
You know how old she was when she passed?
Yes, she was 77 years old, April 26, 1989.
There it is.
Yeah. Yeah, that was, like I said, 1 month before she passed away. Here she is at different stages in her life, different hair colors. When she hit the red, she never lost it, stayed like that for the rest of her life. There's no question about it. She was an iconic memory for all of us. We are all triggered that when we see Lucy, we know we're expecting something really good from her. There was nothing, I don't think she was ever able to top I Love Lucy. I don't think she ever was. But she did do a lot of guest appearances. She did a lot of TV shows. And in those shows, I think there was that spark of Lucy Ricardo that would appear every once in a while. But in terms of TV, nobody did it better than I Love Lucy. And it's going to go on forever and ever. Anything else, Darren?
No, it beautifully said. This is such a comprehensive presentation of her life and her entertainment career. I would love to explore why she has lasted so long and how many people have tried to emulate her, and it's never successful.
I think, I think if you had to go back, it always has to go back to I Love Lucy. It has to go back there, and it has to go back to Desi Arnaz, who understood his wife so well that when they were going to film the program, CBS said, we're filming in New York. He said, we're not filming in New York. We're filming in California. We live in California. And they said, no, we don't have any studios there. We do everything out of New York City. And he said, we'll do it here. And when we do it, we're going to do it in a studio that I'm building for Lucy. We're going to use 3 cameras because I want every camera to be able to capture everything that's going on. I know Lucy works best with an audience. I want an audience there. I want them to let her feel that audience reaction. He knew everything about her on how to make her shine. And the best moment in this entire thing is Lucy, when they were putting it together, CBS said, if you're going to build a new studio, if you're going to get 3-camera shoot, if you're going to get bleachers for the audience to sit in, all these things are going to cost a fortune. If you want that, you're going to have to pay for it. And Lucy and Desi looked at each other, and how does Desi know this stuff? And he looks at them, he says, okay, I'll pay for it. But in return, we own I Love Lucy. And CBS said, sure, go ahead. What do we care? Because in those days, they thought TV was disposable. They thought once the show aired and it went over the airways, who cared? What they didn't know was something that Desi knew. In that moment, he created the rerun. And from that point on, television was never the same.
Yeah. Yeah. Here,
Lucy would never retire, just like Bob Hope would never retire, just like George Burns would never retire. These were people that lived for the audience. I thank goodness that Bob encouraged her to go to that Academy Award ceremony so that she could see that the people still loved her. That she was staying home. If you read the book that I just showed you, she would play backgammon almost all day long. She'd always find different people to play with, and she really was a recluse. She didn't want to go out. She didn't want people seeing her, and she didn't want to have to prove anything anymore.
We certainly ran over, and it was well deserved, Lucy. There's so much to talk about. Let's launch this last poll before we leave. Obviously, Dad and I are looking to the future and seeing how we can continue these programs for all of you. So let's take a vote. Which of these lectures are you most interested to see in the future? And we have Jackie Gleason, Gene Wilder, Bob Hope, Mel Brooks, Martin Lewis, Billy Crystal, or MASH. All fantastic choices. We just want to know. And already I can see it, everything. Oh, it's almost a tie. Everything is almost at like 7% each of these. This is unbelievable.
They're all tied?
They're all moving up. Some of them take a lead, and then somebody's catching up. Billy Crystal, he may have a lead. Jackie Gleason may have a lead, but everything is so close. I mean, the differences are 9%, 12%, 9%, 11%, and we have two that are standing out. All right, it looks like we've gotten most of our votes. So the back of the pack, which everybody seems to tie between 9% and 14%, is Gene Wilder, Bob Hope, Mel Brooks, Martin and Lewis, and MASH. All of them have gotten a great response. The two that stand out are Jackie Gleason and Billy Crystal.
Wow.
Yeah, those are
nice.
the two. Those are the two. So thank you, everybody. Obviously, we put a lot of time and work into these programs, and we want to make sure that we're addressing these celebrities.
I'm so glad that they mentioned Jackie Gleason, because when we do the Honeymooners lecture, when I do my regular lecture, we're only covering that little part of Jackie's life. And we could do the same thing we did with Lucy and bookend his life and show you where he came from and where he ended up. Yeah, I would love to do Jackie, especially Smokey and the Bandit.
We have a chat here to everybody. Did you see from Alyssa Parker? Forget I love Lucy, we love Sal. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
93 today. Is this your birthday? Today's your birthday? 93? Well, happy birthday. Thank you so much for being with us. This is fantastic. Unbelievable. Anyway, okay. Oh, 93 participants, not your birthday. We'll wait. Okay. 93 participants. Yes, thank you.
Wow, 93. Thank you so much. Thank you.
All right,
we really enjoy this. Thank you for tuning in. Again, I wanted to thank Kristen over at Seaford Library. She keeps bringing some of her guests over to us. We truly appreciate it. Thank you, Kristen. Yep. And take it away, Darren.
Here it is. As always, you can keep up with all the programs we're offering at salstgeorge.com. We have our calendar on the homepage where you can see what's coming up next. You can follow us on Facebook if that's more convenient, where we post all of our videos and video clips from the celebrities. And of course, subscribe on YouTube. That's where you can see all of these comedy morning chit chats, everybody we've done so far. I Love Lucy will also be there very shortly. And you can also see all of Sal's favorite clips from these celebrities on his YouTube channel, Sal St. George. Click the subscribe button, and we look forward to seeing you again next week. Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful week. Thank you.
Bye-bye, everybody. Subscribe to us.
Bye.